Do we have any soap opera fans in the house today? Maybe a little All My Children or the... oh, come on. Okay, we got a couple. All right. How about primetime melodramas? Maybe a little Grey's Anatomy or Revenge. Okay, a couple. Okay, well, here we go. So perhaps some of you are a bit more discerning. Indeed, I know in my family, Downton Abbey is a staple, as well as Mad Men and Game of Thrones. We like our trash with a little high production value. But I didn't even get to Real Housewives, my goodness. Whatever your television vice, my friends, let me just say this. No matter how many backstabbings and betrayals, conflicts and confrontations, modern TV has nothing on the book of Genesis. In the first 27 books of this first book of the Torah, the first 27 chapters, here's what's gone down. We have seen the world created, humans wrathfully expelled from the Garden of Eden, the world's first fratricide when Cain kills his brother Abel, and a cataclysmic flood with a big old ark piloted by an old drunk that saves creation from a diluvian extinction. And then there's Abraham and Sarah, some serious drama about infertility, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, a pillar of salt, and then there's the God who speaks directly to good old Abraham and promises him a plethora of fabulous things, with the small catch that he's got to kill his only beloved son. But at the last minute, an angel stays Abraham's hand. Abraham's son Isaac becomes the heir of the covenant. God promises the people a homeland and descendants that will outnumber the stars. Then Isaac marries Rebecca, who gets pregnant with twins, and it's sibling rivalry from the get-go, with the boys literally fighting in her womb and one grasping onto the heel of the other as they come out the birth canal. Modern television has nothing on Genesis. Now, the Jacob story that we heard so beautifully read by Jeannie just a moment ago, we heard a small part of it, and that story is no less dramatic. Jacob is one of those feuding twins. He's younger by a few moments, which means that he is always his father's less favored son. His brother Esau is a strapping hunter. Jacob, on the other hand, spends most of his time in a tent with the women, which, as you can imagine, back in ancient Israel probably didn't go over so well. In ancient times, Dad was not proud of this. But Jacob, who was ever the cleverer of the two brothers, is his mother's favorite, to the point that when Isaac is old and blind and dying, Rebecca invites her son Jacob to go to his father and pretend that he is his twin brother Esau, so that he can get his father's much coveted blessing. When Esau finds out what Jacob has done, he flies into a rage. And he promises that as soon as they have buried his father, he will slaughter his brother and reclaim his birthright. So despite all of the maneuvering and manipulation and positioning, Jacob finds himself hightailing it away from home, getting the hell out of Dodge and running for his life. Jacob's story, at its core, is about the yearning for a home and for community, for a place to call his own in a world that is dangerous and fearful and doesn't seem to have a place for him. In his youth, he did everything he could think of to win his father's favor and assure his security, but it's not enough. It turns out you can't will community or belonging into existence. So there he is, traveling alone in the wilderness, fleeing his family of origin and headed toward refuge with his mother's people in the village of Horan. It's a pathetic scene. He's left in such a hurry that Jacob doesn't have anything with him but the clothes on his back. And so when the sun sets, he has to lie down on the cold earth with nothing but a stone for a pillow. I imagine him lying there, thinking about the questionable tactics he's used to get his way, about how he was always second best in his father's eyes, about how lonely and scared and hopeless he feels. And then when he finally falls asleep, he finds himself in a vision. At first, in the text, Jacob's focus is on the bottom of this celestial ladder, set upon the earth. I interpret this as a symbol of the mundane details of life, those things we have to finish, we get mucked down in or tied up in before we can do the long-range planning, the vision work. Who's going to chair which committee? How will we build a social justice and pastoral care program that meet the needs of a growing congregation? How do we move through interpersonal conflict? And what should the wording of the bylaws be? And yet, if our focus stays always there, we miss the larger picture. So, in the next step of the dream, Jacob looks up. He sees the other end of the ladder extending into that celestial paradise somewhere out of sight. This is everything we aspire to and dream about, somewhere off in the distance, that we might be able to reach if we could just get over these little stumbling blocks at our feet. You know, that time in the future when there will be a plethora of new members and many more children in the program and many rich programs for adults and a full-time minister. But the real compelling part of the dream for Jacob and for us is what happens when we widen our focus, when we expand our gaze enough to take in the whole thing, from the important present details right at our feet to those lofty goals, stretching way out of sight. And then we begin to see the middle, the ladder, bridging the gap between heaven and earth, angels, sparkling angels, manifestations of energy and movement going up and down in between. And with that wider focus, we ask questions like, how can we give those beloved kids down the hall now the spiritual formation they need and deserve, all while working toward the vision of an expanded program down the road? How will we staff the board of directors wisely and faithfully now, while also developing a leadership program that will nurture the next generation of leaders for this congregation? How will we seek a quarter-time professional minister for next year while laying the foundations of a more permanent relationship with ministry down the road? I don't think it's a coincidence that it's only after Jacob widens his focus that he feels the presence of God next to him. God reiterates the covenant made with Jacob's father and grandfather before him. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac, God says, and God remakes the old promise that Jacob's descendants will be plentiful and that the land will be theirs. But God uses different language this time. Instead of the descendants being as plentiful as the stars in the sky, as God promised old Grandpa Abe, God tells Jacob, your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and the north and the south. God is quite literally bringing these promises out of the heavens and down to earth. The word for dust in the Hebrew here is also the same word for that kind of fertile topsoil in which abundant crops grow. God's promise is not a pie-in-the-sky vision. It is an earthy, dirty, gritty covenant that will require work, shared work in the here and now. As one modern Torah commentator puts it, Yaakov is charged with bringing down the lofty spiritual ideals of his father and grandfather to the physical world that he is a part of, as well as elevating the physical world upwards toward the spiritual. And then God makes a promise and delivers a challenge. God tells Jacob, "Know that I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I promised to you." God doesn't say Jacob can just stay there, having had this dream, and everything will just fall into place. Nope. God says, "You're going to be all right, kid. This dream of yours will become a reality. But you got a lot of work to do before that happens." And it's with that loving challenge that Jacob awakes from the dream. Now, I've had a few vivid dreams like this in my life. One where I wake up and it takes me a while to get reoriented to my surroundings. My heart is racing, my mind is working double time to hold on to those images as they start to fade away in the harsh light of morning. You know that feeling? One moment you're in another world, totally immersed in the dreamscape, and the next you're there in your rumpled PJs and your right arm is asleep and you're wiping the drool off your chin and the alarm is announcing that it's time to go make the coffee and get the kids breakfast. It doesn't take long for the real world to set back in. It's one thing to have a brilliant, sweeping, dazzling vision for the future. And it's another to hold on to that vision through the aches and pains and ordinary tasks of life. My friends, I believe that this congregation is in a moment that's a lot like waking up from that dream. Like Jacob along that desert road, many of you have ended up here at Open Circle because you were escaping something. A congregation that wasn't welcoming or that preached theology you couldn't believe. Like Jacob heading toward his mother's people in Horan, you've been journeying along an unfamiliar path toward a destination that represents belonging and community, family, a place whose sheltering walls will hold you and accept and love you, each and every one of you, no matter what baggage you bring through the door. Like Jacob's and like every congregation's, this congregation's family history is complicated, full of innovation and intrigue, success and struggle, resiliency and remorse. And like Jacob, you've had an inspiring dream. Building a Unitarian Universalist congregation here in this town that has the capacity to do real life-changing, life-saving work. And like Jacob, the challenge that faces you now is how to hold on to that lofty dream while also living in the real world as you journey down the road. There are many ways to walk that path faithfully while also keeping that vision front and center in our minds. As Unitarian Universalists, our particular communal spiritual practice is living out our covenant, to keep coming back to each other again and again, even when we're cold and weary and feeling far from home, knowing that we do so not because it feels so darn good to be in a real gritty relationship with each other, because let me tell you, sometimes it doesn't, but we do it because we know that that dream will not materialize of its own accord. We have to build it together. Our covenant is not just about interpersonal relationships. It also is about what each member of the covenantal community is willing to contribute in terms of time and talent and financial resources to bringing the dreams of this community out of the clouds and to building them upon the earth. This morning, the board of directors will be presenting you with a draft of the fellowship's budget for next year. As we all know, budgets are moral documents. They speak to both where communities are now and where they aspire to be. They are the ladders on which the angels ascend from the earth to the heavens. What you will see in this budget plan is a plan for building several of the rungs of that ladder. What your leaders are challenging you to do is to transform this congregation's lucid dreams into a vivid reality. To realize upon waking, as Jacob did, that the presence of the divine, the spirit of life, the embodiment of beloved community is already here, right now, here in this place. And to respond to that realization not with self-satisfaction or fear or complacency, but with forward momentum. That's what Jacob does. When he wakes up, fired up with the memory of that dream, he takes that stone he's been sleeping on, that hard, cold symbol of everything he's been through, and he literally turns it on its side as a monument to all of the possibility and the promise that God has laid before him. He vows to walk the path ahead, to live out the covenant which has been entrusted to him. Although, unlike his father and grandfather before him, he promises to live out this covenant and spread it to all the peoples of the earth. All people will be inheritors of this gracious, abundant covenant, not just one favored son. Then, having erected the stone and made his promise, he vows one last thing. That whatever blessings he receives, whatever gifts he and his descendants are given to steward, they will return 1/10 of it as an offering to God. This is the first recorded tithe, my friends. But Jacob offers it not because he's been guilt-tripped, not because he feels like he has to, but because it is the only appropriate response to such extravagant grace, such abundant and inclusive possibility. The only appropriate response is one of gratitude and generosity. This year, like every year, you will be asked to consider what your pledge to this congregation will be for the next 12 months. I'm not standing up here trying to tell you percentages and numbers. This is not, as my clergy colleagues jokingly refer to it, a sermon on the amount. But there you go. But I am here to remind us that the practice of generosity, in particular the practice of pledging to the spiritual community in which we pursue our personal and communal spiritual growth, in the place where we collaborate to heal this broken world together, to pledge to that community is a practice of generosity that is a communal spiritual practice. So when you discern what you and your family can give, I invite you to look around you. Seriously, look around you. See the earth at the base of the ladder. There are stones and rocks. It's not always smooth and pretty, but then also think about looking up. Look into the heavens. Keep those lofty dreams you hold together in your mind's eye. And then widen your focus. Respond to the invitation to make your pledge knowing that this is a moment of possibility. A moment when we are called to take in both the earth and the heavens and everything in between. This is a moment of waking up, stretching out the aches and pains, turning to walk the path that stretches out before us together. This is a moment of knowing that we have been blessed and choosing to respond to that joy with abundant gratitude. May we awaken re-energized. May we keep our focus wide enough to see the whole of our vision. And in the morning sun of this new day, may we turn to walk the path before us with courage together, step by step by step. May it be so. Blessed be Ashe and Amen. The metaphor of Jacob's